I'm Sophia Mitchell, 28 years old, and I'll never forget the night my father handed me disownment papers for my birthday. It was at Le Chateau, crystal chandeliers above us. When Dad passed me that cream envelope with a cold smile. "Something special," he said. I opened it expecting concert tickets. Instead, legal documents. My name, struck from the Mitchell family inheritance. "You're no longer worthy," Dad declared as my stepmother Diane smirked. "Sign it now." Before I dive into what happened next, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments. If you've ever faced family betrayal, hit that like button. Subscribe to join our community of survivors and hit the notification bell, because this story of corporate sabotage and redemption is just getting started. The restaurant's ambient noise faded to nothing as I stared at those papers. To understand the magnitude of this betrayal, you need to know my history. My mother, Rebecca, was the love of my life. She taught me to stand tall, speak clearly, and never let anyone diminish my worth. When pancreatic cancer took her when I was 8, my world shattered. Dad, Warren Mitchell, buried himself in work at Mitchell Enterprises, the technology manufacturing company my grandfather Harold had built from nothing. For 4 years, it was just Dad and me in our two-big house, tiptoeing around Mom's absence. Then Diane entered our lives. A department head at Mitchell Enterprises with perfect blonde hair and calculated smiles. Within 6 months, they were married, and her 16-year-old son Jason moved into our home. While Dad was dazzled by her, I saw through the performance. The warmth in her eyes disappeared whenever Dad looked away. "You'll never be a real Mitchell," Jason told me my first week as his stepsister. "My mom and I are going to run the company someday." I might have been broken by their constant undermining if not for grandfather Harold. Every Saturday, he'd pick me up in his vintage Bentley for what he called future CEO training. "Warren has the Mitchell name, but not the Mitchell vision," Grandfather would tell me as we toured the factory floors or reviewed quarterly reports in his study. "You, Sophia, have your mother's heart and my business sense. Someday, this will all be yours to lead." Under his guidance, I threw myself into business and finance education. While other teenagers went to parties, I interned at every department of Mitchell Enterprises during summer breaks. By 22, I had my MBA and joined the company officially as an analytics manager. By 25, I was director of strategic planning with my own team and direct report to the executive committee. Then Grandfather Harold died 3 years ago. Heart attack during his morning swim. The company mourned, but not as deeply as I did. He was my champion, my mentor, my true parent in many ways. At the reading of the will, I learned he had left me 25% ownership of Mitchell Enterprises to be transferred on my 30th birthday. The other 75% went to Dad, who immediately took over as CEO. Initially, Dad kept me in strategic planning, even sought my input on major decisions. But gradually, I noticed my meeting invitations decreasing. My reports went unread. My team members transferred one by one to other departments. 2 months ago, while preparing a market analysis, I discovered financial irregularities, large sums transferred to offshore accounts, disguised as vendor payments to companies that didn't exist. When I brought my concerns to Dad, he dismissed them as accounting quirks and suggested I focus on your little projects instead of things beyond your understanding. The conversation ended with him announcing I was being transferred to community relations, effectively a demotion. That night, I overheard Dad, Diane, and Jason in the home office. Their voices low but clear through the air vent. "She's getting too close," Diane had said. "If the board learns about the Cayman accounts before the Hammond deal closes, we'll handle Sophia," Dad replied. "Just like we handled Harold's original will." Now, sitting in that restaurant with those disownment papers before me, everything clicked into place. This wasn't just about inheritance. They were erasing my legal standing in the company before I could expose their fraud. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I'm not signing anything." Dad's face hardened. "You don't have a choice. Sign, or I'll make sure you never work in this industry again." "Happy birthday to me," I said, dropping the papers on my uneaten cake. "Thanks for showing me exactly who you are." I walked out, my legs somehow carrying me despite feeling like I might collapse. Behind me, I heard Diane's hushed voice. "She'll be back." Where else can she go? They had no idea what I was capable of. But they were about to find out. The morning after my disastrous birthday dinner, I drove to Mitchell Enterprises headquarters like I had every weekday for the past 6 years. The familiar 20-story glass building had always felt like a second home. Today, it felt like enemy territory. I tapped my access card at the security gate. The light flashed red instead of green. "I'm sorry, Miss Mitchell," said Carlos, the security guard who had greeted me by name every morning since I started. He couldn't meet my eyes. "Your access has been revoked." "There must be a mistake," I said, pulling out my phone to call my assistant, Patricia. My corporate phone was dead. Not out of battery, completely disconnected. "Management orders," Carlos whispered, glancing nervously at the security camera above us. "They cleaned out your office last night." I sat in my car in the visitor parking lot trying to process this. Dad had moved faster than I anticipated. I tried logging into my company email on my personal phone. Account disabled. I called the main switchboard and asked for Patricia. "Miss Lawson no longer takes calls from outside the building." The receptionist informed me coldly. 3 hours later, as I sat shell-shocked in a coffee shop across from headquarters, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Corner booth. Don't look up." Patricia slid into the seat opposite me, placing a manila envelope on the table. My loyal assistant of 4 years looked over her shoulder before speaking. "They're monitoring all company communications," she whispered. "Warren announced your resignation this morning, claimed you were leaving to pursue other opportunities. When Ryan from marketing asked about your birthday dinner, Jason said you had a meltdown and quit on the spot." "I didn't resign," I said, anger replacing my shock. "Everyone knows that," Patricia replied. "But no one's brave enough to question it with the Hammond Industries merger on the horizon." My stomach dropped. "What merger?" "That's why I risked coming here." Patricia tapped the envelope. 3 weeks ago, I overheard Warren, Diane, and Jason discussing something that sounded illegal. So I placed a recording device in the executive conference room. I pulled out a small digital recorder and USB drive from the envelope. "Warren is selling Mitchell Enterprises to Hammond Industries," Patricia continued. "The board doesn't know the real financial situation. The money they've been siphoning. It's in the millions, Sophia." I pressed play on the recorder. "Once Hammond takes over, they'll discover the discrepancies eventually." My father's voice emerged, unnervingly calm. "But by then, the money will be untraceable, and we'll be long gone with our golden parachutes." "What about Sophia's shares?" Diane asked. "The lawyers assure me that if she's legally disowned before her 30th birthday, Harold's bequest becomes invalid," Dad replied. "The disownment papers are ready. I'll present them as a birthday surprise." "Classic," Jason laughed. Anyway, her strategic growth initiatives would have tanked the Hammond deal. Mom's market cap valuation is what got their attention. "She's too much like Harold," Dad said. "Always putting employees and innovation above profit. The board would have chosen her over me eventually. This way, everyone wins." "Except Sophia," Diane said with a cold laugh. "She'll land on her feet," Dad dismissed. "And if she causes trouble, we have plenty to blame on her incompetence. Those Q3 projections she signed off on? I had accounting adjust them after her review." I stopped the recording, feeling physically ill. "There's more," Patricia said, nodding to the USB drive. "Financial records, emails, meeting minutes. Everything I could download without triggering IT security." "Patricia," I began, overwhelmed by her loyalty. "They're destroying what your grandfather built," she interrupted fiercely. "I've worked here for 12 years. Harold Mitchell gave me my chance when no one else would hire a single mother with no college degree." My phone buzzed with a text from my apartment building manager. "Mr. Mitchell has terminated your lease effective immediately. Security will supervise as you collect your belongings within 24 hours. He owns the building," I realized aloud. Dad wasn't just cutting me off from the company, he was systematically dismantling my entire life. Patricia pressed a burner phone into my hand. "Use this. They'll be monitoring your regular phone." "Thank you," I said, my voice breaking. "You should get back before they notice you're gone." "One more thing," Patricia said, standing to leave. IT reviews all emails sent to personal accounts. Your friend Rachel sent you birthday wishes to your work email yesterday. Jason had her address flagged for surveillance, too. As Patricia walked away, the magnitude of what I was facing hit me. In less than 24 hours, I had lost my job, my home, my family, and potentially my friend's privacy, all while discovering a multi-million-dollar fraud orchestrated by my own father. I had no access to company resources, limited funds, and powerful enemies who had been planning my downfall for years. What I did have was the truth, a loyal ally in Patricia, and a lifetime of my grandfather's lessons about perseverance. Never start a fight, Grandfather Harold used to say, but always finish it. This fight had definitely started. Now I needed to figure out how to finish it. Rachel's apartment became my temporary sanctuary after I cleared my belongings out of my condo under the watchful eye of building security. My childhood friend offered her spare bedroom without hesitation. "Stay as long as you need," she insisted, helping me carry in the 3 suitcases that now contained my life. "I can't believe Warren would do this to you." Neither could I, though the evidence kept mounting. My credit cards, all tied to Mitchell family accounts, had been canceled. My personal bank account remained intact, thankfully, but I knew I needed to be strategic with my savings. Legal battles weren't cheap. Speaking of legal matters, my first call was to Benjamin Harris, the family lawyer who had handled Mitchell affairs since before I was born. Benjamin had always been kind to me, slipping me peppermints during boring meetings and later advising me on my first employment contract. "This is highly irregular, Sophia," Benjamin said when we met at his downtown office the next morning. The elderly attorney frowned at the disownment papers I'd brought. "Disownment has no real legal standing in our state. It's more symbolic than binding." "What about my grandfather's bequest?" I asked. "The 25% ownership that transfers to me at 30? Benjamin shifted uncomfortably. "I'd need to review the original will again. There may be clauses regarding family status." I showed him the recording Patricia had provided. His bushy eyebrows shot up as he listened to my father discuss manipulating company finances. "This is extremely serious," Benjamin said, removing his glasses. "Securities fraud, embezzlement. The SEC would have a field day. Let me make some calls, review the documentation." While Benjamin worked, I headed to the public library. One place I knew had computers my father couldn't monitor. I researched shareholder rights, corporate law, and SEC whistleblower protocols. 4 hours in, my burner phone rang. "Sophia, I've reviewed everything," Benjamin said, his voice unusually formal. "Can you come back to the office? There are some discrepancies in the will documentation that require discussion." Something in his tone made me uneasy, but I had few options. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. When I arrived, Benjamin was nervously shuffling papers. "I pulled the original will from our secure storage," he began, not quite meeting my eyes. "And?" I prompted. "And there are some concerns about." His desk phone rang, interrupting him. "Excuse me, I need to take this." Benjamin picked up the receiver, turning slightly away from me, but not far enough. "Yes, she's here now," he said quietly. "No, I haven't shown her anything yet." "Yes, I understand the retainer agreement, Warren." My blood ran cold. Benjamin was speaking to my father. 20 minutes should be sufficient," he continued, unaware that I could hear every word. "Yes, I'll keep her here." As he hung up, I noticed his computer screen. An email was open with an attachment labeled Mitchell Will Modified 2019.pdf. Modified. "After my grandfather died in 2020, is Jason coming to join our meeting?" I asked casually. Benjamin started. "How did you—" "You've been working for them all along," I said, standing abruptly. "Did you help them alter grandfather's will, too?" "Sophia, you don't understand," Benjamin pleaded, dropping all pretense. "Warren made certain arrangements years ago. The firm's relationship with Mitchell Enterprises represents 60% of our annual revenue. So you helped him steal my inheritance," I concluded flatly. "The documents were already executed," he justified weakly. "I simply didn't." "Question them closely." The office door opened, and Benjamin's secretary poked her head in. "Mr. Mitchell's son is in the lobby." "Tell him to come up," Benjamin instructed, then turned back to me. Sophia, please. This can still be resolved amicably. The disownment papers. I was already moving, grabbing my bag and heading for the emergency stairwell behind the reception area. I heard Jason's voice in the lobby as the door closed behind me. Where is she? He demanded. I raced down 12 flights of stairs, emerging in the building's back alley just as Jason's black Audi pulled around from the front. He spotted me immediately. Sophia, he called, accelerating toward me. I sprinted to my car, thanking my past self for choosing the practical sedan over the luxury sports car Dad had tried to push on me. I reversed out of my parking spot as Jason abandoned his car half in the alley, running toward me on foot. What followed was a tense chase through downtown traffic. Jason returned to his vehicle and pursued me through red lights and one-way streets. Only by cutting through a hotel, parking garage, and doubling back did I finally lose him. Heart-pounding. I parked in an anonymous shopping mall garage and tried to think. Benjamin's betrayal meant I couldn't trust any of my father's professional associates. The altered will explain why Dad was so confident about cutting me out before my 30th birthday. I needed evidence of the fraud, concrete, undeniable proof that would stand up to legal scrutiny. And for that, I needed someone who specialized in following money trails. Megan Rivera and I had roomed together at business school. While I went into corporate strategy, she built a career in financial forensics, specifically tracking fraud for investment firms. We hadn't spoken much recently, but this was an emergency. Sophia Mitchell, she answered on the second ring. Haven't heard from you since that charity gala last year. I need your help, I said without preamble. It's complicated, potentially dangerous, and I can't pay your usual rate right now. There was a pause. You know I just had a baby, right? My heart sank. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. Which means I'm on maternity leave and bored out of my mind, she continued. Tell me this involves spreadsheets and secret bank accounts. And I'm in. For the first time in 2 days, I smiled. It absolutely does. Megan's dining room became our war room. Baby Eliza slept in a bassinet nearby as we spread printouts across the table. What little documentation I had managed to salvage from my hasty office exit via Patricia. Based on what you've shown me, they've been moving money through a series of shell companies, Megan explained, circling entries on financial statements. Classic layering technique. But to really prove fraud, we need the complete transaction history, account numbers, authorization signatures, which are all on Mitchell Enterprises' secure servers, I sighed. Your IT friend, Thomas, right? He could help? Thomas Chen had been the company's network administrator since I was in college. We weren't close friends, but he'd always been friendly, helping me recover files or fix connectivity issues without the usual IT department bureaucracy. It's worth a try, I agreed, sending him a message from a new email account Megan had helped me set up. His response came within hours. This is risky. Meeting in person would be safer. Tomorrow, 5 p.m. coffee shop across from the east entrance. Hope flickered. If Thomas could access the financial records, we'd have concrete evidence to take to the authorities. The next day, I arrived at the meeting spot in disguise. Baseball cap, sunglasses, and clothes borrowed from Rachel that I would never normally wear. I sat at an outdoor table with clear sightlines to all approaches, as Megan had advised. At exactly 5 p.m., a figure approached from the direction of Mitchell Enterprises. But it wasn't Thomas's slight frame. It was Jason's broader silhouette, flanked by 2 security guards I recognized from the company. My heart plummeted. Thomas had betrayed me. I abandoned my coffee and casually walked away, keeping my head down. I'd nearly reached the corner when I heard Jason's voice. Sophia, we just want to talk. I broke into a run. Behind me, I heard the pounding of multiple footsteps. I darted into a crowded department store, weaving through perfume counters and clothing racks. When I emerged through a side exit, Jason was waiting. Did you really think Thomas would risk his job for you? He sneered, grabbing my arm. Dad offered him a promotion to turn over your emails. I had prepared for this possibility. The pepper spray in my pocket discharged directly into Jason's face. He released me with a howl of pain, and I sprinted away, losing his security guards in the rush-hour pedestrian traffic. Back at Megan's house, I paced anxiously. They're tracking everyone I contact. Rachel's place probably isn't safe either. You can stay here, Megan offered. No, I said firmly. You have Eliza to think about. I won't put your family at risk. That evening, my fears were confirmed when Rachel called my burner phone in tears. Someone broke into my apartment, she sobbed. They trashed everything. There's a message painted on my wall. Tell us where she is. Guilt crashed over me. Rachel, I'm so sorry. Call the police. Tell them everything. Tell them where I am if they ask. I would never, she protested. But Sophia, I'm scared. After ensuring Rachel was safely at her parents' house, I checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, paying cash under a false name. Alone in the dingy room, surrounded by my dwindling possessions, I faced the hardest moment yet. Maybe I should just sign the papers, walk away, start over somewhere new. The ancient television flickered with local news. I nearly shut it off when a familiar name caught my attention. Mitchell Enterprises stock rose 15% today on news of a potential acquisition by Hammond Industries. CEO Warren Mitchell issued a statement calling the merger a natural evolution for the company founded by his father. The camera cut to my father at a press conference, Diane smiling robotically beside him. While change can be difficult, Dad told the reporters, this merger ensures Mitchell Enterprises remains competitive in a challenging market. The reporter continued, sources inside the company express concern about potential restructuring, with estimated job losses between 500 and 700 positions once the deal closes next month. 500 people. Minimum. People like Patricia, who had worked loyally for years. People with families, mortgages, lives built around the stability my grandfather had promised them. I turned off the TV, my resolve hardening. This wasn't just about my inheritance anymore. It was about honoring my grandfather's legacy and protecting the people who depended on Mitchell Enterprises. I wasn't going to run. I was going to fight. My burner phone chimed with a text at 7:13 the next morning. Information about Mitchell Enterprises fraud. Arlington Cemetery, Harold Mitchell's grave, 10 a.m. It could be another trap, but the specific mention of my grandfather's resting place felt significant. Few people knew how often I visited him there. I arrived 30 minutes early, surveying the peaceful grounds from multiple vantage points before approaching the familiar marble headstone. No sign of Jason or company security. At precisely 10 a.m., an elderly woman with a cane made her way slowly up the path. Her white hair was pulled back in a neat bun, her posture still straight despite her apparent age. Something about her seemed vaguely familiar. She stopped beside me, laying flowers at my grandfather's grave. He was a good man, she said without looking at me. Nothing like his son. Who are you? I asked cautiously. Margaret Winters. I was your grandfather's executive assistant for 37 years. Now I recognized her from company photos and vague childhood memories. She had retired shortly before I joined the company. Why contact me now? I asked. Because Harold made me promise to help you if Warren ever tried to take what's rightfully yours. She glanced around before continuing. Your grandfather didn't trust his son, especially after that business with your mother's death. What about my mother? I asked sharply. Margaret looked surprised. You don't know? Warren was having an affair with Diane while Rebecca was sick. Harold discovered it, threatened to remove Warren from his will entirely. They reconciled on the condition Warren would never bring that woman into the family. I felt physically ill, yet he married her less than 4 years after Mom died. By then, Harold had softened his stance, thinking of you, but he never trusted Warren again. That's why he left you those shares directly. Margaret reached into her handbag, extracting a sealed envelope. And why he gave me these to hold. Inside were copies of my grandfather's original will, company charter, and a personal letter addressed to me. Harold suspected Warren might try something like this, Margaret explained. He made duplicate copies of all important documents, had them notarized and stored off-site. I've kept them safe all these years. The implications were staggering. These prove the will was altered. Yes. And there's someone else you should meet. Margaret checked her watch. She's waiting for us at my house. Catherine Williams had been a corporate judge for 3 decades before retirement. Her sharp eyes evaluated me as Margaret made introductions in her modest living room. "Miss Mitchell has quite a case, Margaret," Judge Williams said after reviewing our evidence. "Securities fraud, embezzlement, falsification of legal documents." "Can we stop the Hammond merger?" I asked. Judge Williams tapped the company charter. "According to this, any sale of company assets exceeding 50% requires approval from all family shareholders." "But they're trying to disown me before my shares fully vest," I pointed out. "Precisely why they're rushing," she nodded. "But there's a clause here that Harold inserted specifically to protect you. Even a shareholder in waiting has blocking rights on major transactions if fraud is demonstrated. So our priority is proving the fraud definitively," Margaret concluded. "Exactly," Judge Williams agreed. "You need complete financial records showing the money trail." "Which are locked in the company's secure servers," I sighed. "Not all of them," Margaret said with a small smile. "Harold kept backup records of everything. Old-school paper copies stored in a private office downtown. He was paranoid about digital records being altered." Hope surged through me. "You have access?" "I maintained the office after his death. Warren has no idea it exists." By evening, our small resistance team had grown. Margaret's office yielded a treasure trove of documents, original contracts, board minutes, financial statements spanning decades. We established a secure workspace in Judge Williams' home office, meticulously building our case. "We need to disrupt their timeline," Judge Williams advised. "The Hammond merger is their priority." "What if we make Hammond nervous about the deal?" I suggested. "If they pull back to conduct more due diligence, it buys us time." Anonymous tips about financial irregularities would certainly give any acquirer pause. Margaret agreed. I drafted a carefully worded email to Hammond's CFO from an anonymous account, raising specific concerns about Mitchell Enterprises' financial reporting without revealing our full hand. Just enough to create doubt. Within days, Business News reported Hammond Industries had temporarily paused merger discussions pending standard additional review processes. Our first victory was small but significant. Dad would be panicking, knowing his window was closing. But we still needed more concrete evidence of the offshore accounts to build an airtight case. The account numbers must be somewhere in these records. Megan insisted as we combed through statements. They had to originate the transfers from somewhere legitimate. Judge Williams adjusted her reading glasses. "Meanwhile, I've been reviewing the disownment papers. They're legally dubious at best. No court would uphold them if challenged properly. But challenging them alerts Warren that we're organizing a legal response," Margaret pointed out. "True," I agreed. "We need to let him think he's winning until we have everything in place." As our team strategized late into the night, I felt something I hadn't experienced since this nightmare began. Hope. With these unexpected allies, my grandfather's most trusted colleagues, I finally had a fighting chance. "He would be so proud of you," Margaret said softly, noticing me staring at a photo of Grandfather Harold on her bookshelf. "You have his determination." "And his stubbornness," Judge Williams added with a rare smile. "Harold never knew when to quit either." Neither did I. And Dad was about to learn exactly what that meant. The news that Hammond Industries had paused merger discussions created exactly the chaos we anticipated. Patricia reported that Dad had called an emergency board meeting, claiming the delay was merely a standard negotiation tactic. He looked terrible. Patricia reported during our clandestine meeting in a grocery store parking lot. "Hasn't slept in days from the looks of it." "Any mention of me?" I asked. Accepting the USB drive she passed me, containing audio recordings of recent executive meetings. "Only that your personal problems had been resolved," Patricia said. "The board seems satisfied with that explanation, but they're getting nervous about Hammond's hesitation." Back at Judge Williams's house, we listened to the recordings. Dad's usual confidence had indeed cracked. Hammond's CFO is asking for additional financial documentation going back 5 years. He snapped at someone. "Diane, handle it. Give them the sanitized versions we prepared." "We should accelerate the timeline," Diane suggested. "Offer a 5% discount on the sale price. Get them to commit before they dig too deeply." "If we drop the price, the board will ask questions," my father countered. Better that than prison, Jason's voice chimed in. We should destroy any remaining physical records too. That idiot Thomas said Sophia was asking about backup files. A discussion followed about which documents needed to be cleaned up before Hammond's due diligence team arrived. They're getting desperate, Judge Williams observed as the recording ended. This gives us an opening. But we're still missing the smoking gun, Megan pointed out. We need those offshore account details to prove the money trail. An idea formed. What about Amanda Chen at the Financial Times? She broke that story on the geotech fraud last year. A reporter? Margaret looked skeptical. Risky. Not if we're careful, I argued. We don't give her everything. Just enough to start investigating independently. Another pressure point on Dad. Amanda agreed to meet me at a diner outside the city. A business reporter with a reputation for tenacity, she listened intently as I outlined the situation, showing her select documents that suggested financial irregularities without revealing our full evidence. This is potentially huge, she said, reviewing the papers. But I'd need more to publish. Bank records, transfer authorizations, which we're working on, I assured her. But I thought you should know what's happening. 700 jobs at risk. Millions potentially embezzled. I'll start digging, Amanda promised. Off the record for now. But if I corroborate these allegations independently, that's all I'm asking, I said. Returning to Judge Williams's house, I found a surprising message waiting. Linda Mercer, my father's executive secretary for the past decade, had reached out through Patricia. She says she has information about the offshore accounts, Patricia relayed. Wants to meet you privately. I'd known Linda since I was a teenager. She had always been professional but warm, occasionally sharing concerned glances with me when Dad made particularly harsh decisions. It could be valuable intelligence, Margaret acknowledged, but it could also be a trap. I'll take precautions, I promised. We arranged to meet Linda at a public park the following afternoon. I arrived early, positioned Megan on a bench with sightlines to our meeting point, and waited. Linda appeared right on time, alone and looking nervous. Her usually immaculate appearance was slightly disheveled, dark circles evident beneath her eyes. Sophia, she began. Her voice hushed. I've been struggling with this for weeks. What they're doing is wrong. You know about the embezzlement? I prompted gently. Yes. I've been processing the transfer authorizations for 3 years. Warren said it was a tax strategy approved by the board, but I found evidence that contradicts that. She withdrew a flash drive from her purse. This has the account numbers, passwords, everything you need. It seemed too perfect. Why help me now, Linda? Because your grandfather gave me a chance when no one else would, she said, echoing Patricia's earlier sentiments. And because I have cancer, Sophia. 6 months? Maybe less. I don't want this on my conscience when I meet my maker. Her sincerity seemed genuine. I reached for the drive. Don't move. The voice came from behind me. My father's head of security emerged from behind a tree, accompanied by 2 other men. Then, from the opposite direction, Diane appeared, her smile triumphant. Did you really think Linda would betray Warren? She asked, taking the flash drive from Linda's hand. After all, he's done for her family? Linda wouldn't meet my eyes. I'm sorry, Sophia. He's paying for my treatments. I looked for Megan but couldn't spot her. Had they caught her too? Your father wants to speak with you, Diane continued, nodding to the security men. He's prepared to be generous if you cooperate. Sign the papers, turn over whatever evidence you've gathered, and this all goes away. And if I refuse? I asked, though I knew the answer. Diane's smile tightened. Warren was specific about only using necessary force. The security men moved toward me. I had only seconds to decide. I ran. Sprinting across the park, I heard shouts behind me. One of the security men tackled me to the ground, knocking the wind from my lungs. As I struggled, car tires screeched nearby. A familiar voice shouted my name. Frank, my grandfather's longtime driver who still worked for the company, pulled up in his personal truck. Get in, he yelled, laying on the horn. The distraction gave me just enough time to break free, pepper spraying my pursuer before diving into Frank's passenger seat. We roared away as Diane screamed obscenities behind us. How did you know? I gasped when we were safely away. Patricia called me, Frank explained, maneuvering through back streets. Said you might need an extraction. Been watching out for you since I saw those suits arrive at the park. Why help me? I asked. You're risking your job. Frank's weathered face hardened. I drove your grandfather for 30 years. Watched your father destroy everything Harold built. Seen how they treat people since taking over. He glanced at me. Harold Mitchell believed in you. That's good enough for me. Back at our safe house, I discovered Megan had escaped undetected and warned the others. Linda's betrayal had shaken us all. They're escalating. Judge Williams observed gravely. Physical intimidation crosses another line. But we're still missing key evidence, I pointed out, frustrated. We're running out of time and options. Margaret had been unusually quiet. Now she spoke up. There might be one more place to look. Harold kept a personal safe in his old office at headquarters. Said it contained insurance if things ever went sideways. The office was cleaned out years ago, I reminded her. The official one, yes, Margaret agreed. But Harold had a hidden room behind the bookshelves where he kept his most sensitive materials. Warren never knew about it. Hope flickered again. How do we get in? The building's security has been enhanced specifically to keep me out. Leave that to me, Frank said with a determined smile. I still have after-hours access for executive transport, and I know every back entrance in that building. Our team huddled together, planning the most dangerous operation yet, infiltrating Mitchell Enterprises headquarters to find my grandfather's last secrets. The annual Mitchell Enterprises shareholder meeting was scheduled for just 2 days away. According to Patricia's intelligence, Hammond Industries had reluctantly resumed merger discussions after Dad offered significant price concessions. Our window for action was closing rapidly. The safe is our last hope, I told our team as we finalized our infiltration plan. If Grandfather really left insurance, it could be what we need to stop this merger once and for all. Frank had provided detailed schematics of the building's security systems, including camera placements and guard rotations. The executive floor was mostly deserted after 9 p.m., with minimal security presence until the morning cleaning crew arrived at 4 a.m. I'll drive you in through the executive garage, Frank explained. My access card still works for the private elevator. From there, you'll have approximately 30 minutes to find the safe and get out before the next security sweep. Judge Williams, who had insisted on being our legal observer to ensure chain of evidence, would wait with Frank in the car. Megan would monitor security camera feeds remotely, having used her financial forensics contacts to access the building's surveillance system temporarily. We moved at 10:30 p.m., Frank's sedan sliding into the executive garage without incident. I wore a maintenance uniform with a cap pulled low over my face, carrying cleaning supplies as my cover if spotted. Remember, 30 minutes, Frank reminded me as the private elevator doors opened on the executive floor. Any longer and we call it off. The corridors were dimly lit, emergency lights casting long shadows. I moved quickly past my father's current office toward the end of the hall where my grandfather's office had been, now converted to a conference room according to Patricia. Inside, the space was unrecognizable. The warm wood paneling and comfortable leather furnishings had been replaced with sleek, cold modernism, a perfect reflection of my father's transformation of the company. The bookcase was on the east wall, Margaret had instructed. Third shelf from the bottom. Pull the red accounting volume titled Fiscal Responsibility to trigger the mechanism. The bookcase was gone, replaced by a minimalist entertainment center. My heart sank until I noticed the wall behind it had a slightly different texture from the surrounding walls. I moved the furniture aside, revealing faint outlines of the original built-in shelving beneath fresh paint. Running my fingers along the wall, I felt a slight indentation where the trigger book would have been. I pressed firmly, and with a soft click, a section of wall swung inward. The hidden office was untouched, a time capsule of my grandfather's era. A small desk, comfortable chair, and most importantly, a floor safe partially concealed by an antique rug. The combination is your mother's birthday, Margaret had told me. I dialed 041887, and the safe opened with a satisfying click. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, several USB drives, and a sealed envelope with my name written in my grandfather's distinctive handwriting. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. "My dearest Sophia," it began. "If you're reading this, I am gone, and Warren has betrayed my wishes as I feared he might. Enclosed you will find account numbers, passwords, and transaction records for all Mitchell Enterprises holdings, including the offshore accounts Warren established without board approval beginning in 2015. The journal contained meticulous records of every suspicious transaction my father had conducted, along with my grandfather's notes and observations. The USB drives held digital backups of all documents, encrypted but with passwords noted in the journal. This was everything we needed. The smoking gun that would prove the fraud beyond any doubt. As I carefully packed the evidence, a noise in the corridor froze me in place. Footsteps, too deliberate for a security guard's regular patrol. I quickly closed the hidden door, replaced the entertainment center, and ducked behind a conference table just as the main door opened. Diane entered, speaking quietly into her phone. "Yes, I'm checking now. The cleaning schedule shows activity on this floor, but I don't see anyone." She flipped on the lights, scanning the room. I held my breath. "Could be a glitch in the system," she continued. "But after Frank's unexpected day off, I'm not taking chances." She moved toward the entertainment center, examining it closely. Had she noticed it was slightly out of position? As she reached for it, her phone rang again. "What?" she snapped. Then her voice changed entirely. "No, of course I'm still at home in bed, darling. Just checking my emails." She paused, listening. "Warren, don't be ridiculous. Of course I'm not at the office at this hour." She stepped away from the entertainment center, lowering her voice. "Look, we need to talk about Jason. His temper is becoming a liability. That stunt at the park could have brought police attention we can't afford right now." Another pause. "No, I'm not undermining your son. I'm protecting our future. The Hammond deal closes in 3 days, and we need absolute discretion until then." Dad had apparently grown suspicious of Diane. The cracks in their alliance were showing. "Fine, we'll discuss it tomorrow," Diane concluded. "Just make sure those board members are prepared for the vote. I don't care what you have to promise them." She hung up, took one last look around the room, then turned off the lights and left. I waited 5 excruciating minutes before retrieving my evidence and slipping out. In the corridor, I nearly collided with a figure emerging from a side room. "I thought she'd never leave," the woman whispered. I froze, recognizing Diane's personal assistant. "Lisa? Keep your voice down," she urged, looking nervously down the hall. "Security will be here in 10 minutes for their sweep." "Are you here to stop me?" I asked, ready to run. Lisa shook her head. "To help you. Diane's been copying confidential documents for months, preparing to double-cross your father once the Hammond deal closes. She has her own offshore accounts he doesn't know about." This was unexpected. "Why tell me this?" "Because she made me set everything up, and I'll be the scapegoat if it's discovered," Lisa explained rapidly. "I have copies of her personal records. Thought they might help your case." She handed me a small USB drive. "Now go. If she finds out I was here," I didn't need to be told twice. I made it back to the elevator and down to the garage with minutes to spare. "Did you find it?" Judge Williams asked as I slid into the back seat. "Everything and more," I confirmed, showing them my grandfather's journal. Plus, evidence that Diane is planning to betray Dad. Frank pulled out of the garage just as another car entered. Diane's sleek Mercedes. "She nearly caught me," I explained, ducking down in the back seat. "She's suspicious enough to come back at midnight." "The rats are turning on each other," Judge Williams observed. "Classic behavior when fraud schemes begin to unravel." We returned to our safe house where Margaret and Megan were waiting anxiously. Together, we examined my grandfather's records alongside Lisa's information on Diane's separate embezzlement. "This is beyond what we imagined," Megan said, reviewing the transaction histories. "Combined, they've diverted nearly $30 million. And with these account credentials, we can trace exactly where it went." "The shareholder meeting is in 48 hours, I reminded everyone. "That's our moment to act." Judge Williams nodded gravely. "I'll contact my colleagues at the SEC and FBI first thing tomorrow. With this evidence, they can prepare to move quickly." For the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself to believe we might actually succeed. We had the evidence, the legal expertise, and the moral high ground. What I didn't know was that my father had one more desperate move to make. The morning of the shareholder meeting dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the storm we were about to unleash. Our team gathered one final time to review our plan. The SEC and FBI are prepared to move, Judge Williams confirmed. They'll be in position but won't act until we present the evidence publicly. Why not arrest Warren immediately? Margaret asked. Strategic reasons, the judge explained. A public exposure at the shareholder meeting creates an undeniable record. No backroom deals or quiet settlements. Our plan was meticulous. Judge Williams would create a distraction at the main entrance, drawing security's attention while Frank helped me enter through a service door. Amanda Chen, now fully briefed with corroborating evidence she had gathered independently, would be positioned in the audience as press. Remember, Megan cautioned as she helped me with my disguise, a conservative business suit, glasses, and hair pulled back in a style I never wore. The Hammond representatives will be seated in the front row. Their CEO, Robert Hammond, will be next to your father on stage. I nodded, reviewing my mental map of the proceedings. Patricia confirmed the agenda. Dad will present the merger proposal at 10:45, followed immediately by the vote. That's when I'll make my move. Frank drove us to Mitchell Enterprises, parking near the loading dock. Ready? He asked, turning to me. I took a deep breath, clutching my grandfather's journal and USB drives. Ready? The service entrance was exactly where Frank had indicated. His maintenance badge granted us access to the utility corridors that ran behind the main conference hall where the shareholder meeting was taking place. Through a small window in a utility door, I could see the room filling with shareholders, executives, and press. My father stood at the front, reviewing notes with Diane. They looked confident, if slightly strained. Jason lurked nearby, checking his phone constantly. At precisely 10:30, Judge Williams created her diversion, a heated legal argument with security about shareholder access rights that drew attention to the main entrance. In the confusion, I slipped unnoticed into the back of the conference hall, taking a seat in the last row behind a group of institutional investors. Dad began his presentation right on schedule. Ladies and gentlemen, shareholders and honored guests, today marks a pivotal moment in Mitchell Enterprises history, he announced with practiced sincerity. Our proposed merger with Hammond Industries represents not just a tremendous value opportunity, but the continuation of my father's vision for growth and innovation. The irony of him invoking grandfather's name made my blood boil. Slides appeared on the massive screen behind him, showing doctored financial projections and artificially inflated growth metrics. Robert Hammond, a silver-haired man in his 60s, nodded appreciatively from his front row seat. While change can be challenging, Dad continued, the current market realities make this merger our best path forward. The unanimous recommendation of your board is to approve this transaction, which will provide a 20% premium over current share prices. He gestured to Diane, who stood to distribute printed materials to the board members seated in the front row. We'll now open the floor to questions before moving to the official vote. This was my cue. I stood, removing my glasses. I have a question about the offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland, I said clearly. The room fell silent. Dad squinted toward the back of the hall, confusion turning to shock as he recognized me. This is a closed meeting, he recovered quickly. Security, please remove this person. I'm Sophia Mitchell, rightful shareholder and granddaughter of founder Harold Mitchell, I announced, moving confidently down the center aisle. And I have evidence that the current management has committed extensive securities fraud, embezzlement, and corporate malfeasance. Security guards moved toward me, but Amanda Chen stood, press credentials displayed prominently. Financial Times, she announced. I've been investigating these allegations independently and can confirm their credibility. The security guards hesitated, looking to my father for direction. The shareholders began murmuring amongst themselves. This is a desperate publicity stunt, Dad declared, his composure cracking slightly. My daughter has been experiencing mental health difficulties. Is that why you presented me with disownment papers on my birthday? I asked, reaching the front of the room. Or why you altered grandfather's will to steal my inheritance? I held up the journal. I have here Harold Mitchell's personal records, documenting every fraudulent transaction since 2015. The account numbers, the authorizations, all signed by you, Diane Mitchell, and Jason Mitchell. Robert Hammond stood, his expression thunderous. Warren, what is this about? It's nothing, Diane interjected smoothly. Family drama that has no place in a shareholder meeting. I connected my USB drive to the presentation system, overriding their slides with my grandfather's meticulously documented evidence. Gasps echoed through the room as transaction records appeared on screen. $30 million diverted to personal accounts, I announced. Company assets systematically looted while preparing for a fire sale to Hammond Industries, who have no idea they're buying a financially gutted company. Dad lunged for the computer, but I was prepared. I played Patricia's recording through the hall's sound system, his own voice confessing to the fraud, dismissing employee concerns, plotting my removal. You're destroying everything your father built, I told him as the recordings played. He knew what you were doing. He left evidence to protect his legacy, to protect the company and its employees. Security guards now looked uncertain, watching the proceedings with growing concern. Several board members were on their phones, likely calling their attorneys. Jason suddenly broke for the exit, only to find his path blocked by two men in dark suits. FBI, one announced, displaying credentials. Jason Mitchell, you're under arrest for securities, fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Similar scenes played out across the room as federal agents moved in, having been stationed outside awaiting our signal. Diane attempted to delete files from her phone before an agent confiscated it. My father stared at me, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. You think you've won? He hissed as agents approached him. You've just destroyed this company. Hammond will walk away, the stock will collapse, and hundreds will lose their jobs. Is that what you wanted? Actually, Robert Hammond interrupted, stepping forward. I'm far more interested in doing business with a Mitchell who demonstrates integrity and commitment to this company's future. He turned to me. Perhaps we should discuss a different kind of partnership, Miss Mitchell. After you clean house, of course. Dad was handcuffed and led away, still protesting his innocence. Diane followed silently, her calculating mind likely already working on a deal to reduce her sentence. Jason continued struggling against the agents until they threatened additional charges. As the chaos subsided, I found myself standing alone at the podium, facing the shareholders, employees, and press. The room waited for me to speak. Mitchell Enterprises was founded on innovation, integrity, and respect for every employee, I said, channeling my grandfather's spirit. Those values got lost somewhere along the way. Today marks the beginning of their restoration. The room erupted in applause. Not jubilant, but relieved. The truth, however painful, had finally been exposed. As I stepped away from the podium, Margaret appeared beside me, tears in her eyes. Harold would be so proud, she whispered, squeezing my hand. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight lifting. The battle wasn't over. Rebuilding would be challenging. But at least now we could begin. 3 months after what the business press dubbed the Mitchell Revelation, I sat in my grandfather's old office, now my office, reviewing quarterly projections. The renovation had restored much of Harold Mitchell's original design while modernizing the technology. His portrait hung on the wall, a reminder of the legacy I was now responsible for preserving. The fallout had been swift and extensive. Warren, Diane, and Jason faced multiple federal charges for securities, fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Benjamin Harris, the family lawyer, was disbarred and charged as an accessory. Several board members resigned in disgrace when their knowledge of the fraud came to light. The evidence we presented was overwhelming. My father initially proclaimed his innocence, but when Diane struck a plea deal, offering testimony against him in exchange for reduced charges, his defense crumbled. Jason, facing the prospect of substantial prison time, quickly followed suit, turning on both parents to save himself. Mitchell Enterprises had survived, though not without difficulties. The Hammond merger was canceled by mutual agreement, but Robert Hammond had been true to his word, offering a strategic partnership instead. His company purchased a 15% stake in Mitchell Enterprises, providing needed capital while leaving control firmly in Mitchell family hands, my hands. An emergency board meeting following the arrests had appointed me interim CEO. The vote wasn't unanimous. Several old guard members remained skeptical of my relative youth and experience. But with Hammond's backing and the employees' support, I secured the position. The first weeks had been brutally challenging. Our stock plummeted initially as the full scope of the fraud became public. Customers and vendors needed reassurance. Employees feared for their jobs. And competitors circled, hoping to poach our best talent. I worked 20-hour days, personally calling major clients, meeting with department heads, and crafting a transparent communication strategy. No more secrets, no more backroom deals. Every employee would understand our challenges and have a voice in our recovery. The revised projections look promising. Patricia, now my chief of staff, said, entering with another stack of reports. Q3 numbers exceeded expectations in every division except consumer products. Thomas's team is addressing the supply chain issues there, I noted, referring to our former IT administrator. After a sincere apology and explanation that my father had threatened his family, I'd given Thomas a second chance as our logistics director. His gratitude translated into unwavering loyalty and exceptional work. And the employee ownership program? I asked. Legal finished the documentation this morning, Patricia confirmed. We can announce it at next week's company meeting. This was the cornerstone of my recovery plan, converting 10% of company equity into an employee ownership program. My grandfather had considered a similar structure before his death. Now I was making it reality. Miss Mitchell, my assistant, called through the intercom. Your 4 o'clock is here. Warren Mitchell entered my office, looking significantly older than he had 3 months earlier. Prison awaiting trial had not been kind to him. His designer suit had been replaced by off-the-rack businesswear. His confident posture now slightly stooped. Sophia, he acknowledged stiffly. Thank you for coming, Dad, I replied, gesturing to a chair. This was our first meeting since his arrest. His lawyers had arranged it, suggesting he wanted to discuss a personal matter separate from the ongoing legal proceedings. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Your grandfather's office, he finally observed, looking around. You've restored it well. It seemed appropriate, I said. Why did you want to see me? He shifted uncomfortably. My attorneys believe I'm looking at 15 years minimum. Jason may get 5 with his cooperation. Diane. He paused. Diane will likely serve less than 3. I waited, offering neither sympathy nor satisfaction. I wanted you to know, he continued haltingly, that none of this was personal. It was business. Opportunities arose, and I took them. That's all. You tried to destroy me, I reminded him calmly. Stripped me of my position, my home, my inheritance. Sent people to physically intimidate me. How exactly was that not personal? He had the decency to look away. You were becoming a liability. Too much like Harold. Always putting employees and innovation above profit. The board would have chosen you over me eventually. So you admit it, I said. You were afraid of me. I was protecting what I built, he insisted. What grandfather built, I corrected. You were just the caretaker. A role you failed at spectacularly. Another uncomfortable silence. Is that all you wanted to say? I asked finally. He reached into his jacket, removing an envelope. My attorneys prepared this. It's a formal apology and acknowledgement that the disownment papers were legally invalid. They thought it might help with closure. I took the envelope but didn't open it. Is that for my benefit or yours? Both, perhaps, he admitted. I've lost everything, Sophia. My freedom, my reputation, my family. Diane has already filed for divorce. And you want what from me? Forgiveness? Pity? I don't know, he said, suddenly looking very tired. Maybe just to understand how it all went so wrong. I studied the man who had once seemed so powerful and intimidating. Now he appeared small, diminished by his own choices. It went wrong when you forgot what this company stands for, I told him. When you decided that wealth and power mattered more than integrity in people. He had no response to that. I'm not going to forgive you, I continued. Not today, maybe not ever. but I will restore grandfather's legacy and make Mitchell Enterprises something to be proud of again." He nodded slowly, rising to leave. At the door, he paused. "You know, you really are exactly like him. He would have done exactly what you did." "That's the greatest compliment you've ever given me," I replied. After he left, I returned to my work, pushing aside the complex emotions our meeting had stirred. There would be time for processing later. Right now, a company needed rebuilding. 1 year to the day after my disastrous birthday dinner, I stood on the stage of Mitchell Enterprises' main auditorium, addressing our entire workforce. The company had not only stabilized but begun to thrive again. Our stock had recovered most of its losses. Employee retention had improved dramatically, and our new product line, developed from innovations my father had shelved as unprofitable, was receiving excellent market response. "Today marks not just a company milestone but a personal one," I told the assembled employees. "1 year ago, I thought I had lost everything. Today, I realize I've gained something far more valuable, a company family committed to building something meaningful together." I outlined our next initiatives: expanded employee benefits, increased research and development funding, and a renewed commitment to ethical business practices. The applause was genuine and enthusiastic. As I concluded my remarks, the board chairman approached the microphone. "Before we end today's gathering, the board has an announcement," he stated formally. "After careful consideration and review of the remarkable turnaround achieved under interim leadership, we have unanimously voted to remove the interim designation." He turned to me with a genuine smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm proud to introduce the new permanent CEO of Mitchell Enterprises, Miss Sophia Mitchell." The applause was deafening. As I looked out at the sea of faces, people whose livelihoods had been threatened by greed but saved by perseverance, I felt my grandfather's presence strongly. This was his true legacy, not just a profitable company, but a community of people working together towards something greater than themselves. My father had never understood that. I was determined never to forget it. Life had given me disownment papers for my birthday last year. This year, it had given me something infinitely more valuable: purpose. What's the hardest betrayal you've ever faced? Did you walk away or fight back? Share your story in the comments. And if this tale of corporate intrigue and family drama resonated with you, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and redemption, and share with someone who might need inspiration to stand up against injustice. Remember, sometimes our greatest challenges reveal our greatest strengths. Thank you for listening to my journey, and may you find the courage to face whatever battles await you.